Hi there, my name is Henry Tenby. I am the creator of the JetFlix all aviation streaming service. And in this video, I'm going to be telling you about the Prang of Eastern Provincial Airways Carvair CFEPX that took place back in 1968. But first, I'd like to ask if you have any old Kodachrome slides of aircraft sitting in closets or cupboards or in boxes that are collecting dust. I am looking for vintage 1960s or even 1950s generation Kodachrome slides that I can use in video productions just like this. So don't hesitate to contact me. My email is shown on the screen right now, and I would really appreciate any old slides that you have for future videos. So that would be awesome. Today we're going to be looking at the Eastern Provincial Airways Carvair Prang that happened on September the 28th, 1968. For those of you that aren't aware, a Carvair was a modified DC-4, and it was actually Freddie Laker who founded the company, Aviation Traders Limited in England, I believe it was in the early 1960s, and his company purchased surplus used DC-4 aircraft, and he modified them by basically converting them into mini 747s. They put a big hump on the front of the airplane and a forward opening cargo door as well, so that trucks and vehicles and cargo could be driven or pallet loaded through the front nose of the aircraft onto a pallet roller system for cargo transport by air. And Freddie Laker was quite successful with this venture, and a number of Carvairs were built. And I'd say probably the major factory airline, if you could call it, of the Carvair would have been Aer Lingus. And also probably British United, who used them on the Channel business of taking vehicles across the English Channel between the UK and various places in France and Belgium back in the early 1960s. Anyhow, in 1967, Eastern Provincial Airways, a Canadian regional airline, as we would call it today, purchased 3 Carvair second-hand from Aer Lingus. They purchased CFEPV, I believe it's EPV, EPW, and EPX. So these 3 airplanes were purchased in 1967, and apparently the pilots that flew them, well, they weren't used to flying these aircraft. So it was a new type, and it was kind of a new kind of flying for them. And what happened was, on this particular instance, they were doing a cargo and passenger transport run in Labrador, and they were flying out of, I believe, Goose Bay up to a place called Churchill Falls. And Churchill Falls has a single runway, I believe it's runway 34, and it's a remote location, gravel strip, of course, and that is where the accident happened on September the 28th, 1968. So basically, I don't have a Carvair model to kind of explain what happened, but I do have this Connie, so it's gonna make do as our demonstration airplane. Apparently, the Carvair was carrying, I believe, around 38 passengers and cargo. So they were operating in a combi configuration, passengers and freight. And this runway 34 at Churchill Falls I believe there are obstacles around the runway, and the pilot tried to land the aircraft very close to the threshold to give as much room for rollout as possible. So as the aircraft was landing, the accident report, which is what I've studied, suggests that the landing gear hit a berm or some kind of a small obstruction at the far end of runway 34 as it was attempting to make its first landing. So there was no damage to the aircraft, but apparently the pilot immediately elected to do a go-around. So the airplane continued and went up to altitude, and they developed, I guess it's one of those situations where, which is often the case in accidents, it's a series of circumstances that pile up on each other. So apparently after this aborted takeoff, the number 2 engine developed a power problem. And what they did is apparently they circled for some time to figure out what was the issue with the engine, and I believe they shut the engine down, well, it wasn't generating sufficient power. I believe they shut the engine down. And I will say, if you have more information or additional information on this event, any information that can make this video more accurate, please do leave a comment, because I definitely welcome people's comments, because the objective is to provide the most accurate information as possible. So I'm just going with what I know. So the airplane circled, and it was basically a 3-engined Carvair, and then it returned to the airport and made a second landing attempt. And on this second landing attempt, again, the pilot tried to land as close to the threshold as possible. You don't want to land long, certainly when you only have 3 out of 4 engines operational. So again, the attempt was made to land very close to the threshold. And the accident report suggests that the DC-4, it landed nose first. And when it landed nose first, as is often the case, I mean, you've probably seen it at airports. When an airplane lands on the nose, it'll usually bounce up and then settle down. That's just how aerodynamics and aircraft design works. So the nose hit first, and then it settled onto its left gear. So it basically landed on its left gear. It wasn't simultaneous touchdown on the 2 main gears. So it landed on its left gear, and apparently it did a squat and pivot. And when it pivoted around on that gear, the airplane essentially went into an uncontrolled state, and that was the result of this accident. So it did a squat, hit the left gear, came around like this on the pivot, and settled off the runway. Probably from the pictures which I'm about to show you, it looks like it's about 3,000 feet down the runway. I believe it's a 5,500 foot length runway. And as I say, they were landing on runway, single runway. They were landing on 34. And when the aircraft came down on its starboard wing, you'll see the carnage was quite remarkable. I guess the force of that strike on the starboard side basically broke the wing spar, and the wing basically ripped up. And now, I'm not an expert. I'm not a professional aircraft engineer. We would definitely need the opinion of perhaps some of the guys at Buffalo Airways who work on these airplanes and have worked on these kinds of aircraft for decades to give their professional opinion on what happened. But to my eyes, it looks like the wing spar broke. When it after did that pivot, the wing spar broke on the starboard side. It's interesting to note that the main gear remained affixed at the 3 tie points underneath the wing. So the starboard side gear remained intact, which is incredible. Also, although the starboard side wing literally got ripped off, the port side wing was completely intact. Now, well, I shouldn't say completely intact. They did have loss of some of the flaps on this side, because the airplane basically, it did the squat like this and went off the runway. Imagine my arm being the runway. It went off the runway, and it was essentially like that. And port side wing was intact, although there was obviously flap damage. Everybody got off the airplane safely, which is incredible. I mean, very, very lucky incident. Also, it's amazing that there was no resultant fire. I'm guessing the aircraft was probably carrying return fuel. That's just my guess, but still, they're very, very lucky that they didn't have any form of shifting load to result in injuries of passengers on board. No fire. So everybody walked away from this incident. The aircraft was a complete write-off, and everybody lived to tell the tale, and that's a great thing. Now, the pictures I'm about to show and share with you right now were taken by a young pilot who was a first officer with Quebec Air at the time, and his name is Anthony Pleasance. And Anthony saw one of my previous videos, and he saw me holding up my Kodachrome slide sign, and he contacted me, and he said, "Hey, I've got some slides that I think would make quite an interesting video for you." So very special thanks to Anthony for having the foresight to take the pictures, and for sharing them with us so that we can now share them with you and the world, so this event can be recorded for posterity. I should point out that I did ask Anthony what was Tony, what was the circumstance as to why he had his camera. He explained that they, at Quebec Air, they knew that this airplane had crashed. He was actually visiting the airfield on his scheduled flight, I believe 2 or 3 days after the 28th of September. And in the message that I received from Tony, I'll just read it to you. The accident happened on the 28th of September 1968. On October the 1st of 1968, I was the co-pilot on an F-27 of Quebec Air, flying from Montreal to Quebec City, Sept-Îles, and Churchill Falls, and return. He said the captain on this particular flight was Roland Pootmans, and you'll see him. He's in one of the pictures. There is the captain standing there in his uniform looking at the carnage. That is not the captain of the EPA Carvair, that Prang. That is the captain of the F-27 that was flying that day with Anthony. So that's just to set that straight. He said, we had about 45 minutes on the ground, and because he knew that he was going there, he took his 35mm SLR camera loaded with Kodachrome, and he took some absolutely unbelievable images, which I'm going to be sharing with you. A small factoid, the airport is sometimes referred to as Twin Falls on navigational charts, but here in Canada, the parlance is that we refer to this airport as Churchill Falls. Yes, he confirms it was a 5,500-foot runway, 150-foot wide. Apparently, the accident investigation also stated that the pilot did have limited Carvair experience, as I explained at the outset, and the fact that they touched down early, it was just a confluence of circumstance that led to the accident. I guess perhaps losing the number 2 engine didn't help matters, because that added threw a spanner into the works as well. I'm now going to share with you some amazing Kodachrome images that were taken by Anthony on October the 1st, 1968. These are really fascinating images. This is the very first Kodachrome in the sequence that Anthony took. He's standing on the edge of the runway, looking, I would say, north. Along runway 34. You can see the runway is predominantly a hard pack surface. It's not a paved, or it was not a paved concrete runway. And there are markers running along the left side of the runway. And you can see the airplane, how it pivoted to the left there. And it looks like it's maybe, not even an airplane length beyond the left side of the runway. And I'm guessing that location is probably I'm going to say probably at about 2,000 or 1,500 feet from the threshold of the runway. It looks something like that. And the doors open on the airplane. And this just gives you a general setup of how the airplane was sitting relative to the runway. Our photographer, Anthony Pleasance, then walked down the runway until he got basically abeam the aircraft, and he pointed his camera and took this photograph, and I should say Kodachrome, and we can see how the aircraft essentially, when it pivoted 90 degrees, it left the edge of the runway surface where the pickup truck is parked there at the left, and it settled on its belly. And obviously the port side wing remained attached and the starboard wing broke. The wing spar broke and it angled up 45 degrees. We can see the difference there. What we can also see is that the aircraft didn't go that far beyond the left edge of the runway. It settled very near the runway itself. So it was an operational situation that they did have to get this airplane removed in pretty quick order. From my eyes, I'm not a professional engineer, but somebody perhaps like a Buffalo Airways engineer might be able to confirm that we are in fact looking at a wing spar break on the starboard side of the aircraft. It seems obvious to me. And here we have a close-up view of the carnage on the starboard side of the aircraft. We can see that the wing is torqued up 45 degrees. And the landing gear you can see is completely intact. It's fully attached at all 3 pressure points underneath the wing, and there was very little damage, it appears, to the actual gear itself. But the wing itself, when that spar broke, of course the landing the landing forces there when the ground was struck. The flaps were damaged, and of course there's extensive damage to the engines. We've got bent props, and we've got some crumpled skin on the lower belly of the aircraft as well, and I'm sure there's other damage as well. But of course the largest damage that we're looking at is the structural damage of that broken spar. Also, notice all the mud and dirt and debris on the top of the airliner. That's pretty, until we actually had the Amazon Prime 767 landing accident here in Vancouver several months back, I just didn't appreciate how much debris from the dirt and runway surface gets up onto the roof of an airplane in the event of an aircraft leaving the runway. And it's certainly very evident here as well. I'm very shocked to see that. And here's a slightly different view, also showing the starboard side. The captain standing by the engine there, the number 4 engine, is Captain Roland Pootmans. Roland Pootmans was the captain of the Quebec Air F-27 that was flying on October the 1st with our photographer, Anthony Pleasance, who was the first officer on the F-27. So Captain Pootmans there, he was not the pilot of the Eastern Provincial Carvair that was involved in this accident. He was actually just having a look at the situation along with our photographer. Now there's 2 gentlemen standing by the side of the airplane. It looks like they're carrying maybe a shovel, I'm not sure. They were, I guess, involved with the recovery and or the Transport Canada analysis of the accident. So I don't know who they are exactly, but they're obviously there in some form of official capacity. We can also see the registration of the aircraft quite clearly, CFEPX. And yeah, it's just a little bit of a different view. Also, we can appreciate, you can see the hump at the front of the Carvair, how profound that hump is. What an interesting modification that was undertaken by Sir Freddie Laker when he modified the DC-4s to Carvair status back in the early 1960s. Our photographer, Anthony Pleasance, went in close to take this somewhat detailed shot of the landing gear with the three hard points of the gear still well attached. You can see the landing gear is pretty much intact. The tires that are intact as well, although dirty. Although you can see the various components of the flap section have endured fairly significant damage, crumpling, I would say. And there are the 2 men. Looks like they're involving some form of a winch or rope to be tied to or affixed to the underside of the airplane. So I guess they're figuring out a way to remove the aircraft from such close proximity to the edge of the runway. So they're involved in the recovery of the aircraft, removing it so that they can basically return the airport to fully safe, non-obstructed operations. So that was obviously what we're seeing here. Remember, this was September the 1st. The accident happened on this is on what we're seeing here. These photos were taken on the 1st of October. The accident happened on the 28th. So we're already a few days after the accident, and the recovery efforts were already underway by the time these pictures were taken. This scene, looking forward of the starboard side engines and wing, shows the extent of damage to basically there's some kind of a rip, some kind of a gouge just on the outboard side of the number 3 engine. I don't know what that is, but obviously something to do with striking the ground. I guess when that engine struck the ground, it ripped up, up towards the sky, and then it basically ripped that sheet metal that you can see. The props obviously bent, damaged, buried into the ground. We can see, I believe, in the lower left-hand corner, that looks like either a gear door or part of the flap assembly buried in the dirt there. So yeah, just another interesting perspective of this accident. And you really do have to appreciate that when you look at this, how extensive the damage was to the aircraft. It's so amazing that, number one, there were no injuries. Everybody walked off this airplane. And number 2, they're extremely lucky that they did not have a fire, because that could have completely changed the outcome of this accident in a very significant manner. In this image, again, we have the Quebec Air F-27 Captain Roland Pootens standing on the far left, looking at the carnage of the Eastern Provincial Airways Carvair Prang. And he's the pilot of the F-27 that brought our photographer, First Officer Anthony Pleasance, to the scene on October the 1st, 3 days after the accident happened. And I guess Captain Pootens was talking to one of the people involved with the aircraft recovery, and our photographer, Anthony Pleasance, walked around the aircraft and took these amazing series of Kodachrome images, which we are able to analyze and savor today, some 60 years in the future after the accident happened. This is the one and only Kodachrome image that our photographer, Anthony Pleasance, took, showing the port side of the aircraft. And as we can see here, remarkably, the wing is not severed. It is attached at the spar through the fuselage. So there was no damage to the spar on this side of the aircraft. But look at the chew up on certainly the outer edge there of the trailing edge of the wing. The flaps are just kind of chewing away to nothing. And we've got some extensive damage even on the inboard flaps. We've got even the tips of the props bent up. And again, lots of dirt and debris on the roof of the aircraft, which is apparently now certainly appreciated by me as something that's quite a regular phenomenon when an airplane leaves the runway and ends up in the dirt. Although Eastern Provincial Airways lost this particular aircraft in 1968, they continued to operate the other two Carvairs up until 1973, when they sold them actually back to the UK, and they continued to fly for a number of years after that. Here's a slide that was taken in 1973 that shows CFEPW, former Eastern Provincial Carvair, taken in the United Kingdom after it had returned from Canada back to the UK for its continuing life over there. I'd like to sincerely thank Anthony Pleasance for providing these amazing images for our viewing enjoyment. And if you have any vintage Kodachrome slides from the 1960s or 1950s, please do send me an email to henrytenby@gmail.com. That would be hugely appreciated. Look forward to seeing your comments in the video comment section below. Hope you'll give it a thumbs up, and I hope you've enjoyed this video as well. And I'll definitely look forward to seeing you on the very next video. Hi there, my name is Henry Tenby, and I'd like to tell you about my brand new book. It's called From Lodestars to Jets, and it's the most image-heavy, comprehensive, it's the most extensive history on Air Canada, Trans-Canada Airlines that has ever been published in the annals of aviation history. The book is absolutely loaded with images, that many of which have never been seen before. Let's have a look at the pages, and then you can decide if this book deserves a spot on your bookshelf. I'm going to give you a little bit of a tour of the book. Isn't that gorgeous? It is printed on 105 GSM paper, so it's super high quality paper. It is absolutely loaded with images. As I say, there are approximately 600 images, just under 300 pages. Many of these images have never been seen before. And the stories that are within these pages, many of them have long been forgotten. And it is information that is absolutely fascinating relating to engineering and fleet planning and fleet development issues at Trans-Canada Airlines. Look at that Viscount wing structure design, feathering system. We've got a section on the Bristol Freighter, some face changes around TCA engineering, and then sections on the Connie. Models make moolah, of course, for you aircraft model fans. Whole sections on the Connie North Star. There we go. Engineering Department, 1950. Fabulous shot taken at, where's this? Cartierville. Absolutely gorgeous. And this will take you back to the good old days of Trans-Canada Airlines. As I say, I believe this is the most comprehensive history on Trans-Canada, Avro jetliner, that's right. Trans-Canada Airlines was instrumental in the development of this aircraft. Of course, up to the jet age, the introduction of service to the DC-8s, and other airplanes that were considered by TCA at the time. This is not the same old Air Canada history that we've seen many times over the decades. This is all brand new information, brand new stories. I've posted a link in the upper right-hand corner of this video that'll take you to the book information and order page. Also, I should point out that time is of the essence. Limited production on these books. Once they're sold out, they're probably sold out forever. And I hope you will enjoy the book as much as I enjoyed putting it together. Thank you very much.